GamingBolt presents 10 popular video games with major plot holes. While there have been a number of games that have done a great job of telling good stories and telling them well, that doesn't take away from the fact that storytelling hasn't always been the primary focus of video games. Maybe that's why games have usually been able to get away with some fairly significant plot holes. Here in this list, we've compiled what we feel are 10 of the most notable narrative flaws we've come across in games. You may not, of course, agree with the graveness of these flaws, or alternatively, you may be privy to some information about why these plot holes aren't plot holes. So let us know what you're thinking and fire away in the comment section below. Warning, there will be spoilers ahead, so if you see us mentioning a game you don't want spoiled, skip ahead. Life is Strange. Life is Strange is a wonderful game, but its true strength lies in how well written its characters and their relationships are with each other. Because when it comes to the larger narrative, there are a lot of issues to speak of. Some of these, the game doesn't even bother tackling, but the most significant one perhaps is at the very beginning of the game. When Max first witnesses Chloe getting shot in the bathroom and she unknowingly uses her powers to rewind time, she finds herself back in her classroom. And this would be fine except throughout the rest of the game, whenever Max uses her powers, while she does rewind time, her actual physical location while doing so never changes. It wouldn't be a big problem, but given that the first scene is basically the foundation for the rest of the story, it sticks out a bit more than it otherwise would have. The Metroid series. The chronology of the Metroid series is more than just a little confusing. Firstly, the Metroid Prime trilogy is supposed to take place between the events of Metroid and Metroid 2, but apparently Retro Studios forgot about that fact, because there are log entries in Metroid Prime that refer to the destruction of Zebes, an event that only took place in Super Metroid, which is a direct sequel to Metroid 2. Then there's the fact that Samus has killed the last Metroid on multiple occasions, and characters like Ridley and Kraid have also been killed by the famous bounty hunter several times. Sure, it's still nowhere near being as much of a mess as the Zelda timeline, but it's enough to be a major irritant to fans of the series. With Metroid Prime 4 on the way, we're hoping some of the confusion will be cleared up. Mass Effect 3. Of the many flaws in Mass Effect 3's story, this is probably the one that makes the least sense. The Catalyst controls the Reapers and resides in the Citadel, and the Citadel conveniently is the key to defeating the Reapers. So when the Catalyst finds out, being an all-powerful entity, that the inhabitants of the galaxy have discovered the importance of the Citadel, why doesn't it just move it out of reach immediately? Why does it wait till the very end of Mass Effect 3? More importantly, when the Reapers do end up moving the Citadel, why do they take it to Earth of all places? Granted, the Reapers have quite a solid hold over Earth by the time Mass Effect 3 approaches its final act, but don't they know that the Citadel is the key to their eventual destruction? They do, and yet they still decide to bring the Citadel to Earth and gather all their forces around it. Earth, which is humanity's home planet, and will soon become ground zero for the biggest galactic war in millennia, where the species of the galaxy will all converge with all of their might, where the humans have a distinct home field advantage. Why not just move the Citadel to some other place and gather Reapers' forces around it? Why not take it into dark space outside the galaxy where the Reapers resided for 50,000 years and leave it there, out of the reach of the inhabitants of the Milky Way? Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Oh, what a game! If you play it and don't think about the convoluted mess that is its story, The Phantom Pain is sheer brilliance. It's incomplete, sure, but its genius in game design is undeniable. It's a shame that the story makes less than 0 sense. The Phantom Pain is an absolute goldmine for this kind of discussion, so in order to make sure that we don't end up writing a lengthy essay here, let's just focus on one single issue: the vocal cord parasites. Look, we know this is Metal Gear, the series that has everything from vampires and nanomachine sun to insane conspiracy theories and a guy who somehow uses photosynthesis. Over-the-top ridiculousness is par for the course in this series. Even so, the vocal cord parasites were a little hard to digest. Skullface wants to kill people selectively based on the language that they speak due to some misplaced resentment, and he does so by unleashing a virus that targets only English-speaking people. Okay, Kojima, we love you, but you need to chill out. The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. The Dark Brotherhood is probably one of the best questlines in all of Skyrim. It's dark, it's got interesting characters, it's got escalation, and it's got great individual quests. But much like so much else in Skyrim, the payoff to the entire thing is a little disappointing. The questline ends with you assassinating the Emperor, and you don't need us to tell you how huge that is, especially in the context of the Civil War backdrop of Skyrim. But the game simply refuses to have any sort of payoff for your actions, and even an event as major as that doesn't tie in with the main storyline. It's as if killing the Emperor has no consequences on anyone whatsoever. It would have been a major oversight no matter what, but given the fact that the Empire is so integral to the story of Skyrim, this particular plot hole becomes even more ingratiating. Heavy Rain. The more you think about Heavy Rain, the more you realize that it's full of plot holes, narrative flaws, and logical inconsistencies. It is undoubtedly a very good game, and nothing can change that fact, but it's disappointing that its narrative is so heavily flawed. The biggest flaw, perhaps, is also the one that is most commonly discussed: Ethan's blackouts. How is it that they are always in line with the Origami Killer's timing and actions? The game never bothers to explain any of it, and the only explanation we can possibly come to is that it was nothing but a way to misdirect the players from the actual reveal at the end of the game, which also made little sense, since if we've been playing as the Origami Killer and have access to Shelby's thoughts, we really should have known about it all along. And we have no issues with misdirection, as long as it's done properly. Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 is a generation-defining experience, but even it has flaws. The elusive man spends billions of credits on Project Lazarus, trying to bring a dead Commander Shepard back to life so that he can assist Cerberus in their fight against the Collectors and, in a grand scheme of things, against the Reapers. But there was no need to do that. When you really think about it, all of that money could have been better spent on researching the Reapers and their Collectors, and breeding and training an entire army of super soldiers with the sole objective of fighting against the Reapers. Shepard was just another man. He was an extraordinary man, but he was not completely irreplaceable. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad Shepard came back, but the way that it was done was a bit too convenient. Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots. You probably expect us to talk about how Metal Gear Solid 4 made it so that nanomachines were the answer to life, the universe, and everything else. But at this point, we've already spoken about that to a great deal, to the extent that we've turned it into a tired old meme that we just used, but let's ignore that part. So let's talk about something else. Let's talk about how right at the end, Solid Snake had absolutely no legitimate reason for stopping Raiden from going through the microwave corridor and choosing to go himself. Raiden's body was almost completely mechanical, meaning that going through that corridor would have been no big deal for him, whereas doing that nearly killed Snake. Sure, we can argue that Snake was already kind of suicidal at that point due to his belief that he was about to become a biological weapon soon enough, but if he really wanted to die that badly, he could have just stayed behind to get swarmed by soldiers while Raiden went forward. Sure, it built up a great deal of dramatic tension, but it also made very little sense. The Zelda timeline. The Zelda timeline is a mess. You know it, we know it. With the release of Breath of the Wild, though, it's gone back to being a maddening mess. There's just so many things to talk about here, but the biggest issue of all is probably the Downfall timeline, the timeline in which A Link to the Past takes place. Why is it the biggest issue? Because essentially it is the mother of all retcons. The Downfall timeline just tells logic where to stick it and says, but what if this completely different thing happened? It's a completely hypothetical situation. There's just no logical reason to assume that the events of all the games in that timeline ever actually happened. We Zelda fans tolerate it because we have to, but let's face it, it's beyond ridiculous. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. No, we're not going to talk about how Nathan Drake is actually a heartless killing machine. That topic has been done to death already. Let's instead focus on one of the more memorable sections of the game. Remember when Nate and Sully go into a clock tower in Madagascar, right in the middle of a crowded marketplace? We're not used to seeing such civilized, populated locations in Uncharted 4, and inconsistencies in that scene showed just why that is the case. There's no denying that the clock tower set piece was amazing, but how was it that the entire mechanism, gigantic gears and cogs and all, crashed into the ground right from the top of the tower and not a single soul outside even noticed that anything was wrong? Surely someone must have heard something, right? We get it, it's not exactly a huge plot hole and it's more of an inconsistency, but it's definitely worth mentioning. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.